It's late, you've already eaten dinner, you're not hungry, and you're standing in front of the fridge anyway, looking for something sweet. You find it, you eat it, and for a few seconds your brain feels something close to relief. You didn't need those calories. You knew that before you opened the fridge, and you did it anyway. That's not a willpower problem. That's a 15-million-year-old survival system, still running exactly as designed in a world that no longer needs it. Somewhere between 5 and 23 million years ago, deep in the Miocene, our ancestors were small fruit-eating primates living through a period of intense global cooling. Fruit, their main food source, was becoming harder to find. Winters were getting longer. Starvation was a real, constant threat. And then something happened in their DNA that would end up shaping how every single one of us eats millions of years later. A gene called uricase mutated. Normally, uricase breaks down a byproduct created when your body processes fructose, the natural sugar in fruit. But in our ancestors, that gene got switched off. Silenced, and the effect was strange. Without uricase working properly, fructose started triggering the body to store far more fat than it normally would from the exact same piece of fruit. Richard Johnson, a physician and researcher at the University of Colorado who has spent years studying this mutation, found that this wasn't a flaw, it was an advantage. An ape with this mutation could eat a handful of fruit and store noticeably more fat from it than an ape without it. In a world sliding into famine, that difference was the line between starving and surviving. So the mutation spread, and it's still in you right now, more than 15 million years later. But storing fat more efficiently was only half the trick. The other half was making sure you wanted that fruit in the first place. This is where taste comes in. Your tongue can detect sugar at concentrations as low as 0.5%. That's an extraordinarily sensitive system, far more sensitive than it needs to be just to identify food. Evolution built it that sensitive on purpose, because sweetness wasn't just a flavor, it was a signal. Ripe, safe, calorie-dense. Eat this. Eat as much of it as you can find, because you have no idea when you'll find it again. And your brain backed that signal up with one of its most powerful tools. The moment sugar hits your tongue, your brain releases dopamine, the same chemical behind almost every reward system you have. Daniel Lieberman, an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, put it simply: sugar is a deep, deep ancient craving, and he's pointed out something almost unsettling about what would have happened without it. Imagine an early human who simply didn't like sugar. They'd eat less of it. They'd store less fat. In a hard season, they'd be the one who didn't make it. The ones who craved it intensely were the ones who survived long enough to have children, which means, in a very real sense, you're descended from the hungriest, sweetest-toothed humans who ever lived. But here's the specific detail that explains the fridge scene at the start of this video. Neuroscientist Kent Berridge at the University of Michigan spent decades studying what dopamine actually does, and found something that upended the conventional understanding completely. Dopamine doesn't mediate pleasure, it mediates wanting. The craving that pulls you toward the fridge before you open it, before you've tasted anything, that's dopamine. The actual enjoyment once you eat, that's a completely separate system, which means you can want something intensely, consume it, feel mild satisfaction, and immediately want it again. Not because you liked it that much, but because the wanting system never registered that it was satisfied. Your ancestors' brains were built to want sugar before it arrived, so they pursue it relentlessly when it was rare. That system has no off switch when the fridge is always full. For millions of years, this system worked exactly as intended, because it was nearly impossible to overuse it. Sugar existed almost exclusively in fruit, seasonal, limited, fibrous, and requiring real effort to find. Honey existed, but it was defended by bees, available only in certain seasons and required genuine risk to collect. The sweetest thing your ancestor could find in an entire year was fundamentally constrained by what nature was willing to give up. The craving and the environment were perfectly matched. Then, in a tiny fraction of evolutionary time, the environment changed completely, and the craving didn't get the memo. In the 1970s, a Harvard-trained researcher named Howard Moskowitz was hired to study something simple: why people got bored of food. What he discovered instead reshaped the entire food industry. By running thousands of taste tests and feeding the results into a regression formula, Moskowitz found there's a precise mathematical sweetness level where people enjoy a food the most. Not a little sweeter, not a little less. An exact peak. He called it the bliss point. Food companies took that discovery and ran with it. Soda, pasta sauce, bread, cereal marketed as healthy, even things that don't taste sweet at all, were quietly reformulated to land exactly on that peak. Not because people asked for it, because hitting that precise number sells more units. Your 15-million-year-old uricase mutation has no idea any of this is happening. It still reads sugar as rare, valuable, worth craving hard every time it shows up, because for almost all of human history, it almost never did. It has no defense against an entire industry that spent decades and serious money finding the exact formula to trigger it on command. So that moment at the fridge, late at night, not even hungry, that's not a personal failure. That's an ancient survival instinct doing exactly what kept your ancestors alive through a famine 15 million years in the past, now responding to a product engineered on purpose by people who ran the math to make sure it would. Your ancestors had to fight to find sugar a few times a year. You have to fight something built on purpose to make you crave it dozens of times a day. Same 15-million-year-old craving. A completely different world built around exploiting it. And that leads somewhere stranger. Because if the craving never changed, what did that craving actually do to the human body when the world around it did? Did ancient humans ever get fat? And if they couldn't, why can't you stop?